And welcome everybody to the Michigan Women's Coaches Show. We are very, very lucky. Coach Tribbiano is here, but we are extraordinarily lucky to have a special guest with us for our show today. Sue McDowell has been involved in hockey since she was a kid in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. She played both NCAA hockey. She's been integral in women's hockey in Michigan. She helped create She helped create the Michigan women's hockey team, and she's been in with ACHA teams, high school teams throughout the state. She's also been involved in the management of the CCWHA, the Central Collegiate Women's Hockey Association, the Michigan Amateur Hockey Association, and the Michigan High School Girls Hockey League, just to name a few. Lots and lots of different acronyms going on. So thank you, Sue, very much for joining us.
Welcome.
We really appreciate it. You've had to deal with me in all sorts of capacities.
My pleasure.
But you helped co-found the Michigan women's hockey team with three other folks back in 1994. Who was all involved in the creation of the first Michigan women's hockey team at Michigan?
So I had three collaborators. We had myself, we had Kate Begeman, she was Kate Pinney back then.
Excellent.
Camille Hutchinson, and Allison Hart-Young. All of us had roles at the University of Michigan, so I was on staff as a staff IT person. Kate was an athletic trainer. Camille was actually the ice scheduler at Yost, and Allison was a graduate student at the School of Education, and she's currently still on faculty over at Western.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Absolutely wonderful. What were some of the biggest hurdles you had when trying to face the team? I know there was probably a plethora, but what were the big ones that really caused you heartache? And
You know, we're sort of, you're in a whole different world, right? The 1990s were an entire different planet. I mean, people talk about pre-COVID, but this was like pre-planet, I think, at this point. In 1994, I was on the cusp of having started a bunch of other programs. I'd started the girls program that was in alliance with the Ann Arbor Hockey Association.
Nice.
I'd gone back into playing. I had played at Colby College, and then I'd moved to Michigan. We advertised in the Daily, and we had very good success with that, and get the players to show up. We had very varied abilities on our players.
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that.
And that was really that first period, that 94, 95. We got ice at Yost. I mean, we just took the ice that we could get and put it together in a jigsaw puzzle that made sense for the team. And I had called up another gentleman, Bill Petruri, who has been involved since the inception of the program, and said, Bill, I'm coaching 5 teams, and I'm doing this, and I'm working a full-time job. Can you coach?
Yeah.
I got this group of women who'd like to learn how to play hockey. And he said, sure, I'll come down and coach. And the next thing he knew, he was running practices and getting games together and doing the whole 9 yards. So that's
fantastic.
That's kind of how it came together.
And you were able to play at Yost?
We did.
Awesome.
Yep, we played
That's
at Yost.
Wonderful.
I mean, we played a round robin of, the CCWHA was still coming along, and there were college club teams out there. The landscape at that time was pretty heavily the NCAA teams were along the eastern seaboard. Right?
Yeah.
Out here in the Midwest, most of them were club programs or senior women's teams. And so we played a mix. The other thing is that club sports at the University of Michigan at that time was faculty, students, or staff.
Oh, so you could
have faculty and staff on a team. It was actually CCWHA that said it had to be all students.
Ah, okay.
So those of us who started the team played for that year, and really by the time the next year, we played those inaugural games in the fall of 95 and into 96, but when the full year of 96 came around and we were playing for the CCWHA, then all of us stepped back, and it was just a student roster.
But that's nice to be able to have that when you first start playing, to be able to be on the ice and fill out where you need to and things of that nature. And I'm sure as a goaltender, your services were
that was very helpful.
At times.
I had a colleague that we split time with that she had been in the senior league, so that was helpful. Kate actually had played at Cornell, and I had played at Colby. And so although we suspect our time overlapped, we didn't have a clear memory of that. She's from Ann Arbor, and I obviously had moved here. And Allison played out on the East Coast. So you had 3 out of the 4 people familiar with the game and familiar with how to organize things. So that helped.
And this was before the CCWHA.
Correct.
So how hard was it to find opponents? Like, who did you end up playing the first couple years before the CCWHA came into play?
There's a fair amount of chatter. We laugh about how easy it is to talk to everybody now with social media.
Yeah.
But as I'm sure you can remember, if you have a niche, if you're interested in something, whether it's, model trains or marching band songs or women's ice hockey, you find people everywhere.
Absolutely.
In the Metro Detroit area, there was the Metro Skaters Hockey League that had started up. and they had a number of senior women's teams that were playing.
Oh, very cool.
And so we played them. We often had tournaments, or we went to games and played them, and then we played our colleagues. We knew Bowling Green had a team, Lake Forest had a team, Illinois had a team, Michigan State had a team. They actually precede us by a year. So there's a certain amount of, you just know, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And all the girls know each other because they've all done high school or gone off to various colleges. So it spreads like wildfire in terms of, we could play you, we could come up.
That's wonderful.
And who doesn't like to come and play at Yost?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a great place to play, and probably easy to get folks to come in.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
What was the first game in team history? Do you remember?
I actually brought along a visual cue.
Awesome.
A visual cue of the first game, which was December 17th of 1995. And it was our team playing the Toledo Lady Lightning women's club team.
Fantastic.
And we won 4-0.
Awesome. Well,
So
that's even better.
You love that. That's always a nice thing to have.
Win the first game out there. That's fantastic. I love that you kept that.
I actually have most of the early records. My records start to fall apart after I was no longer participating as a volunteer in 2016. But I have a lot of the early records, and initially the intent was to write some sort of memoir or some sort of history of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ultimate intent is always to get up to the Bentley Library. Because they do a big women's sports collection.
They do wonderful
and I think
stuff,
future researchers will be able to go through that if they want to.
I would love to see a book like Blue Ice or something for the women's program, and that would be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
There's a lot of history in Ann Arbor with hockey that isn't as well documented. Some of the high school team when it was Ann Arbor High School coming together, a lot of that is kind of hard to find records and things. So.
It's interesting because I have a lot of it, and you always are tempted to get rid of it because sometimes you hold on to the documents that have people's names, right? And you're like, are people going to want this sometime?
Yeah.
So then you've got tuition dollars coming in and minor expenses going out. University of Michigan has no problem with people who apply here to go to school.
There are plenty of people who want to come to U of M.
Michigan is not worried about a niche market for tuition. That's not their thing.
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of a challenge. It makes it different. But to your point, then everything flows from there, right? Because it is very different when you have a team that you're playing against a team that knew its ice schedule the previous February. They know their gear. They know their travel. They know their athletic directors. They have their whole game protocol. They travel by bus. And back to my 1994 example, we're still trying to put it together with cars.
Absolutely.
And asking somebody if they've got Band-Aids. That's just not a good it's not a good match. And it's actually sort of a tribute to those teams that are in the CCWHA that are in that place as NCAA schools, that they continue to be competitive and continue to really give them a run for their money.
Absolutely.
So.
And you became CCWHA commissioner in 2019 and then just stepped down this past year.
Right.
What got you into that? How did you get drawn into being the commissioner?
That actually was almost a step back for me. You were reading off my resume to begin with, but I think after I'd coached for a while in Ann Arbor hockey and I was playing in the senior men's leagues and in the senior women's leagues, and you're young and you're professional and you like to organize things and you keep shooting off your mouth because you could do it better, then somebody finally says, then you do it better.
Absolutely.
And you become the president of a league, and then you become, eventually, I was the Michigan Amateur Hockey Association Girls and Women's Director, so then you're in charge of the girls programming of the states, and we actually hosted nationals in 2000.
That is awesome.
In Troy, so we had 52 girls and women's teams in Troy, Michigan that we hosted. And then I kind of stepped back a bit because I realized that my career, I did actually have a working job at the University of Michigan, and sometimes you have to balance those things out.
Absolutely.
And by the time that Molly Mahoney, who had been the previous CCWHA commissioner, said she was moving on, she had been in the ACHA job for quite a while, and she wanted to get rid of her CCWHA pieces. I had already backed off from my involvement with U of M a few years before that, and I thought, I could probably do this. I know how to talk to these teams. I know how to organize these things. And the number one criteria that Molly expressed it was making sure we had a good tournament. And I thought, I have run tournaments since it feels like forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that didn't feel like it was going to be particularly difficult. And I said to Molly, what do you think if? And she put it out to vote. And that's what happened.
Nice.
And then COVID came, which is a little different than what I'd expected for my second year in that position.
Right, no doubt, absolutely.
We got one tournament in, and then off we went.
And then I'm sure being the commissioner of the CCWHA had plenty of challenges. What's involved with being a commissioner of a league like that?
Size. I mean, the first off is just general size. Because
Yeah.
when I first started, even before 2019, obviously through U of M and other teams, I'd been engaged in the association.
Yeah.
It's grown. You've got multiple divisions now, multiple needs. It's appealing to people outside the Great Lakes area, so sometimes that's
Definitely.
like a struggle that way. I think their colleagues is always a challenge. There is now a D1 and a D2 division. There probably should be in short order a D3 because
Sure.
even the D2 teams now are more organized than a true casual student club.
Yeah.
So there's room for a D3 if you just had a group of female athletes that wanted to organize and play a few games, but wanted the
Almost more
insurance
like
and wanted
intramural.
yeah, and not every school offers those.
Sure,
So I think
absolutely.
that's kind of that space. And so that certainly that expectation, budgeting, organization around a much larger organization than Inception.
Yeah.
And truly expectations, I think, more than anything else. Because that's the
Yeah.
we have full-time paid coaches with strong professional plans for their programs.
Absolutely.
And expectations about the events and expectations about the services that the league can provide. And then you have other programs that are just holding it together
They're
each year,
just-
right? You're
yeah,
calling
making
them
it
every
through.
summer saying who's the president and are you going to make it.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest one.
Absolutely. And then, of course, the tournament is the crowning achievement. And you have both D1 and D2 tournament.
Right.
How has that evolved over the years from when Michigan and the CCWHA first came in to now? What's the tournament kind of evolved?
My goal when I took over as a commissioner was to try and make that less of a honk affair.
Okay, sure.
I mean, I can remember showing up with a team sometimes where you didn't know which locker room you had, and you knew your schedule ahead of time, and barely.
Yeah.
And you didn't always like the schedule, but you didn't have a rationale for why it was the way it was, or they were in locations that were a little suspect, and it's kind of like, okay, that's the cheapest ice, but
Yeah.
did we really need to play here? So really my hope that first year was, if nothing else, I want to make sure we know the facility, we have good ice, we've got off-ice staff, because having those scorekeepers and timekeepers and trainers and people like yourself, it all is a part of the event. When I first got involved, there was the sense that event would have broad appeal to a wide audience of attendees. We've learned that really isn't the space that it occupies. The D1 group decided to go to a single elimination format, and so the likelihood that family are going to come in to watch one game and it's win or go home, you're not necessarily coming all the way over from Chicago or someplace to see your player and then go home that night.
Yeah.
So that has a more diminished audience response. The D2 is incredible. The D2 does a round-robin format. They get their 3 games in, and every team comes with an entourage of 20 to 40 audience members.
Because they know they're going
to be there all
they're gonna have
weekend.
games, yeah.
They're very excited about it all. Part of what makes that a big deal for both divisions is that the winner of each division gets an automatic bid into nationals. And so that's huge.
Absolutely.
For the D2 group, over the years, we've broken now into regions. And so winning the CCWHA helps because although many of our teams in the CCWHA are our region, it's seeding for nationals.
Which
And so
is
that can
huge.
matter, right?
Absolutely.
That can matter in terms of where you're going.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
At least the last couple of years, you don't want to see Sue in your first matchup.
No.
So,
No. Avoid that.
boy, they've been impressive the last couple of years.
They have been. They have been.
So you're also really very involved in women's high school hockey here in Michigan. You even started a team in Washtenaw County for folks who didn't have a high school to play in. How has the opportunities for young women to play hockey in this area evolved since you've been a part of it?
So women's ice hockey kind of follows a lot of other women or girls' activities, I think. When I first came into Ann Arbor to start the girls' teams in the Ann Arbor area, although there were a number of supportive Ann Arbor ice hockey parents and staff on their board, we actually weren't a part of them because there was some concern that the girls would take ice away from the boys' programs. And so we were the Ann Arbor Girls Ice Hockey Alliance.
Gotcha.
And we negotiated to get ice from them. And then over the course of the years, that became moot, and we moved into their programming, and we were fine. In '97, one of the things I tried to do is to get a team going at Huron High School, a girls' team at Huron High School.
Yeah.
Because Pioneer was getting traction on getting their girls' high school team together.
Absolutely.
And the Michigan Girls High School League was starting. And so there was a lot of energy around trying to get that going. What we fell into is that the only ice that was available to us was 6 in the morning. And
Not
unlike
easy.
the swimmers who could go to the campus at Huron, swim, and then go right to class, the ice hockey players weren't really excited about coming to the Cube, having a practice, and then somehow having to get back to Huron for school.
I get that.
So that didn't have legs for quite a while. That said, both Pioneer and then Huron, in combination with Skyline, really began to develop their girls' high school teams. And so a couple of years ago, one of the goals was to get Washtenaw United started, because that would pick up all the schools that, for girls who can't play at Pioneer or Huron or Skyline, it picked up
Absolutely.
everybody else. So Saline, Milan, Manchester, Dexter, Chelsea, Whitmore Lake. It picked up all those girls who might want to play high school hockey. And I think what's matured is that there's more a sense of, for a very long time, we were all fighting over the same card deck of players.
Yeah.
And several years ago in Ann Arbor hockey, we had made sort of a handshake deal that we couldn't compete with the Tier 1 branding programs that were coming along.
Sure.
So a girl in 8, 10, 12, by the time she started to think about 14, she was looking at Bell Tire or Honey Baked or any of the other programs that were out there for Tier 1.
Yeah.
And we couldn't compete with that. If that's what she thought she wanted to do in order to be able to get the college scholarship, there wasn't much we could do to say. And the numbers were thin enough that it was hard for us to have a 14, 16, or 19 girls team.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of scattered to the winds at that point. And a lot of them got involved in other high school sports, too.
Of
So by the
course.
time you start getting into high school, you've got a whole different life opening up to you, and you're trying to balance where hockey comes. So Pioneer, the Huron Skyline combined team, they were having success with their girls, and we said to AHA, you know what, why don't we do 8, 10, 12, maybe the first year of 14,
Yeah.
and then we make sure everybody in the community can go to a high school team.
Which is awesome.
And
That's
that was
wonderful.
that was sort of how we started off, was saying we'll start up Washtenaw United, and then
Yeah.
there should not be any girl in the Washtenaw County area who wants to play hockey, high school hockey, that
Yeah.
doesn't have an opportunity to do that.
Absolutely.
The Girls High School League, even though we aren't recognized by MHSAA, we follow their guidelines and their rules. So it is a winter sport. So you follow all those things where you're not on the ice until October 31st. You're not actually getting your team together November 1st. Your games are November 13th. They're done by the 1st of March. That's a very different product than what you're
Yeah.
doing if you're playing in August through April on a travel team.
Definitely. Definitely.
But I kept hearing from parents and girls in our area that that was the product they wanted, that was what they wanted to do, because their lives in high school just changed. They wanted to
Because
be
they
part of a
wanted to be
tribe.
able to,
Yeah. They wanted to be part of a tribe. They wanted to have things going on in the fall, things going on in the spring. Hockey was my thing in the winter. They wanted their school pep band to come down. They wanted their teachers to know that they were on the program. And once you start hearing that kind of feedback, it's like, well, then why not?
Absolutely.
I think the last piece for me was that after years of coaching, both in the men's leagues and then also in the girls and women's leagues, I had the opportunity to coach over at Plymouth Canton Salem.
Oh,
and
sure.
so I coached for a couple of years over there with their high school program, and that was pretty much it for me. As soon as I watched those girls and listened to those families and talked to them, I thought, this is what we need.
Yeah.
This
Oh,
is
yeah.
really what we need. So,
I mean, I think it's even in boys hockey where it's been traditionally. You go to these. The high school kids are finding a way to be seen and
They are.
get into major programs. And I think the same thing can be said. I love that Pioneer has both a JV and a varsity squad, and I just would love to see. Have you seen a lot more at the lower levels, pre-high school, a lot more attendance and involvement? Has it grown, or is it about the same?
it's growing slowly. It's
Okay.
growing slower than I would have wished. You're talking like 50, 60 more.
Yeah.
You're not getting the numbers you want necessarily.
yeah.
It's just kind of still a little thin. But I think high school as a product now, you've got 20 girls teams this year playing in that league,
Which is fantastic.
and it wasn't all that long ago that there were maybe 6.
Yeah.
So I mean, to get that kind of response, there are 2 other teams out there that want to be high school teams. There's a growing interest in that space, and that's really, we can't hope to be part of MHSAA unless we have athletic directors that are willing to take that case to them.
Absolutely.
It doesn't come, unlike community teams, it doesn't come from parents. It
Yeah.
comes from the athletic directors of the schools making their pitch to the board of MHSAA. So that's the goal.
And I'd love to see it be an MHSAA sport. At the
Yeah.
same time, it's a little bit easier for me to broadcast when it isn't. So,
That's true. You have
Nothing
kinda-
against the finals, but we can broadcast where we want, and that's great.
True. No, that's true.
So I know one of the big things that one of the big excuses against creating levels in NCAA hockey for women around the sport has been a lack of growth in the younger leagues for girls. what can we do to really support that? What can we do to make that better and to really increase girls' youth hockey in Michigan?
You know, I think it's one of those. I was looking at the statistics before coming on, Mark, and I was kind of smiling and thinking that the numbers of girls is not booming, but also the number of boys are not booming.
Sure.
So I think one thing we need to do is to look at it as hockey and
Yes.
figure out ways to get kids on the ice and figure out there's a new demographic of parents. I mean, one of the things that's very appealing to high school is it's time limited.
Yeah.
And I have some nephews who are now raising families of their own. They're very excited about 5, 6, 8-week programs. They're not so excited about signing up for something in August that they're not going to get out of until May. Which is a different. That's a different model than we've had in the past for the sport.
Absolutely.
I absolutely love our arenas in Michigan. Many of our arenas are private, and
Yeah.
so that means they can make their contracts by whatever choice they choose to do. There are other communities across our country that have more public facilities, and public facilities have different requirements.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think getting your daughter involved, talking up, making sure she's having fun, making sure she's touching the puck, making sure that she keeps going.
Absolutely.
There are a lot more girls now playing on youth teams. USA Hockey very specifically calls them youth. They do
Yeah.
not split them into girls and boys. So that's a space that has opened up considerably since the 90s. And I still see a lot of girls playing that are 11, 12, 13 years old playing on a youth team.
That's fantastic.
Comfortably. And I think as long as they're comfortable and as long as they're getting a good experience out of it, more power to them.
Absolutely, as opposed to some of the stories I used to hear of just trying to find your way onto a house team somewhere, and yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
I think the other thing, you know, you do a fantastic job in promoting the events that we have, and I think that's the other thing I would say for people is that powers that be, powers that either have the politics to change the administration of the sport or the open the purse strings, have no real choice but to work by numbers, right?
Yeah.
And if you've got 5,000 people standing outside of Yost to come see Michigan State women's hockey, that is a very different story than if 10 people have come and are kind of floating around in the lobby. Right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's the other thing. If there are people out there that really enjoy the game and really want to help promote girls and women's ice hockey, attend.
Get to the games.
Attend and put it on social media. Watch, you know, the programs that you do. If you can't come up to the CCWHA finals, watch them on the media. Promote them amongst your friends. You know, that is one of the benefits of social media these days, right? Is you can tell people what you're doing. Most of us are not down there in Australia and New Zealand watching the soccer players, but everybody knows what the score is.
Absolutely.
So.
I'd love to make it there, but that's not what.
There is a national women's team down there, ice hockey team. So you know you could go down and
Fantastic.
broadcast. You could get
Absolutely.
Coach Jenna to see if she could take her team on an international road trip.
Now, personal level. So you played starting off with the Cape Cod Aces. You played at Colby College and several senior leagues. What got you behind the bench and in the administrative office and kind of involved in that piece of hockey?
The first thing that got me in there is that natural, you know, we were laughing before the mic started about aging and injuries and the accumulation of noises when we stand up or when we get off the bench or when we start skating. So in '94, I started to recognize that I probably wouldn't be in net forever.
Fair enough.
I had been playing since the early 70s, and things were starting to creak and starting to hurt. And I wasn't sure what the next option would be. USA Hockey had just launched their coaching education program.
Nice.
And I thought, well, I'm not really sure where this is going to go, but maybe I should start educating myself as a coach and
Can't hurt to get that knowledge.
Right, see how that helps out. And as you can imagine, I was the only one in the first. I was the only female in the first. So it's the first 2 levels of USA Hockey coaching certifications, and many of the organizers and other coaches there were like, "Oh man, could you come coach this team, or could you come coach that team?" And at the time, I was thinking I wanted to be a goalie coach. I wasn't necessarily interested in coaching any specific age group. But then I got a phone call from the Ann Arbor Hockey Association the night before their Mites skate was going to start. So these are little kids, 5, 6 years old, and they were missing a coach. They'd had a parent that had walked, and they needed a head coach. And I called a couple friends of mine and said, "Is there any chance you would assist me on this game?"
Yeah.
And that was the start of the coaching. So we were behind the bench with mites and then squirts, and then by that point the girls' programs had really taken off, and we were coaching the girls' teams. You know, administrative-wise, I think the coaching thing for me was giving back.
Yeah.
My dad and another real estate agent in town on Cape Cod, both of them had daughters who wanted to play ice hockey. We had an arena that had been built in our community, and they stepped up and figured out how to do it in
That's
1972. And so there was a certain piece of it that felt like, well, I don't know how to do this, but other people don't know how to do this either. And we're all stepping up and figuring it out together.
Absolutely.
And somebody has to, because every team will tell you they don't want to be the ones making the decision in the last 5 minutes about who's going out to hold that tie or who's going to go out.
Yeah.
You know, nobody wants to do that on the bench, right? That's what a coach is for. Like,
Absolutely, definitely.
You go tell me who's serving that penalty that none of us want to admit we took. You know, that's the things that coaches
Absolutely.
do. So
Absolutely.
And I enjoy it. So.
So I know we're all hopeful and very excited about what Coach Tribbiano is building here at Michigan. What are some of your happiest Michigan women hockey memories from before Jenna's time?
From before, I have to think through these things. Careful thoughts. I have two pretty clear memories. Both of them, I think, before Jenna's time. Well, I know one of them was, and that was it 2010 when we had the Big Chill? The Big Chill event with Michigan State at the Big House. I think
that's right, yep.
Big House in the winter. Through contacts and connections in the hockey programs in Ann Arbor, we got the ice to have the Little Chill.
That is awesome.
And so the Michigan women's team played Michigan State, and to walk down that runway out onto the field of the Big House, and it started to snow, and it was nighttime, and there were lights, and it's right before Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
That whole experience was pretty amazing because, you just playing outdoors under those conditions in that venue was really pretty impressive, pretty exciting for us. And then I think the other one that I took personal pride in, actually kind of gets me choked up about it, was Michigan State game at Yost. We had beaten them in a very, very hard game to play. And the seniors that year went down into the corner next to the fans and started singing Hail to the Victors. And I can remember the audience, which I had counted out to be about 1,200 people that day, were all singing along too.
That is fantastic.
And it was one of those surreal moments, right, where if you're fortunate enough to live long enough, you're like, well, that never happened in '94. That's kind of what you kind of dream that maybe someday that could happen.
Definitely.
But that was a pretty special moment, just to hear that kind of love and commitment for the women on the team, but then also up into the stands and all about your school.
That's the moments you dream of after a big win, and everyone just having that moment with the students and the team, and that's fantastic. I know one of my favorite recent memories was being at Nationals and screaming with you this past spring. I can't repeat a lot of what we said, but
got the voice that pierces across the ice. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. If I can't be broadcasting, it was fun to sit there and cheer with you. So
it actually had been fun. One of the reasons I wanted to go to Boston this past year was it was the first time in 20 some odd years that I hadn't been affiliated with a team or been in the role of CCWHA commissioner.
Yeah.
So to be able to go just as a sheer fan,
just to watch,
was just a real delight. That was a real delight to do.
So what piece of advice would you have for someone who was there in the beginning? What piece would you have for Jenna and the team moving forward? Is there anything that any pearls of wisdom you've gathered?
I was trying to think through what, the advice. I was always teased as being someone who had a lot of righteous indignation.
Sure.
I'm pretty calm, and I don't necessarily like conflict, but there are certain things that just get me riled up, and I go for it.
Understandable.
I think that one of my pieces of advice would be to continue to not back away from those.
Nice.
I think there's some really hard conversations that come up anytime around underfunded sports that you're passionate about.
Absolutely.
And I think continuing those conversations and not getting fatigued by them and finding a way to kind of do what you can do to keep going in that space is critical. I've teased Jenna a couple of times about having worked at the University of Michigan for almost 30 years. I always used to say it was like a glacier. You went in day after day after day, and it never moved. And then all of a sudden you'd walk in someday and find out like an entire edge had calved off.
Sure. And
an opportunity was present or a new program had started. And so you really never know, right? You just kind of keep going, and you keep true to the convictions you have about your sport and about what you're trying to do with your team. And I think having those hard, transparent, candid, this is who we are and this is why we want to do what we're doing, can move mountains.
Absolutely.
It just doesn't always happen in the timeline that
certainly
we want, right?
Absolutely.
Even my righteous indignation didn't help me with that. I couldn't always get things to move as fast as I wanted them to.
I completely understand. My poor wife had
a lot of places. So it's a catch-22, right? Until you can get the teams, you can't get the numbers, and you can't. If you don't have the numbers, you can't get the team. People all the time trying to figure out the next avenue for their daughter. She's fully aware of the high school league. She punts things over to me. I punt things over to her. And I think any of those things that continue to create visibility and a support and sponsorship of the sport that you love and are not going to back away from, right? Not just, well, I don't know, I don't have a place to play next October that makes sense for me.
Yeah.
Well, what would make sense for you? And who could provide that team for you?
Absolutely.
And who do you need to call to make sure those pieces fall into place?
Absolutely.
I think that's going to be what helps. Money helps all the time. There's lots
It
of ways
does.
to donate.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
For
I
better or
think,
worse.
right. So I think that's the other thing is, I just talked with a family the other day that did not think their youth hockey association, they couldn't play in their youth hockey association because they thought the fees were too high. And it hadn't occurred to them to go to the youth hockey association and ask if there was a scholarship fund.
Absolutely.
And they went and found out the fees were just fine, and their daughter is playing on a team.
That
so
is
I think those
perfect.
kinds of, the walls are still maybe visible to some people, but
Yeah.
they're nowhere near as thick as they used to be.
Excellent.
So.
Well, I really, really appreciate you joining us.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you, Mark.
Any closing comments before we?
It's been a lot of fun talking to you about it. I'm never really
Absolutely.
sure how many people want to go back into the dusty, dark ages.
Oh, I'm always super interested in that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Fun to share. Go Blue.
Yeah, absolutely, go Blue. So we appreciate Sue joining us, and then if you want to slip out, and we'll have Jenna come in here. And again, I just do want to mention that there will be a fundraiser coming up with Washtenaw Dairy. So keep on the social media. Check that out. Again, thank you so much to Sue for everything she's done, starting the team and more. We hope next week to have another special guest. Hopefully Coach Ned will join us, who is here. And we'll hopefully get to talk to him. And then, so anything you want to add after having listened to the fantastic Sue and listening to that?
Yeah, I think obviously knowing Sue for about 10 years now, she's super special for our program. We're super grateful for everything she's done. So thank you, Sue, for being here and spending your time with us. Thanks to Regents Field again. I just wanted to confirm that former assistant coach Ned Glisson will be on the show next week. I know he has a large following in Ann Arbor. So we're super excited. Hopefully everybody can come down next week to listen to Coach Ned. I think just spending time in downtown Ann Arbor, being here at Regents Field is something that's super special, and
Definitely.
looking forward to continuing that throughout the season.
And hopefully we can even, Coach Ned and I are talking, hopefully we can have an announcement. He might join us for some of the games as a color commentator, and we would love to have that. I know you folks are completely sick of my voice as you hear me all over, so we would appreciate and look forward to his expertise. Now, I know last week we talked about what the second game of the season will be, and that's going to be a huge clash with Michigan State. That's going to be at September 30th at the Mount Clemens Ice Arena. That's going to be right before the Metro Jets' first game, so come on out. You can do a doubleheader. This week we'd like to announce the first game of the season, as well as the first huge road trip of the season. So that way you can book your hotels now. So the first game of the season is going to be versus
Concordia University Ann Arbor.
Perfect. And it's going to be, so it's a local in-town clash. It's going to be over at the Arctic Edge of Canton, so you can come out and check that out. They'll be on the 29th, so the day before Michigan State. That will be 8:30 p.m. So make sure you come on out. We would love to see you there. And make it a Wolverine weekend. Check that out. Check out the Michigan State game. And then right after that, we have a huge first road trip, and similar to last season, there's going to be 2 games up at Lake Superior State.
Correct.
So that's going to be fantastic. That will be at Sault Ste. Marie at Taffy Able Arena on Saturday, October 7th. That will be a 7 p.m. game, so you can take off on Saturday. You don't have to take Friday off. And then the 2 teams will square off for Game 2 on Sunday, October 8th at 1 p.m. So you don't even have to take vacation time to go see the team. You can take off Sunday, get back, take off Saturday, get back Sunday night. So, and that gives the team a nice chance to get away from things and kind of be a team early on. Did that really kind of help the bonding and everything last season to have a nice big road trip early?
Definitely. I think we talked about it during one of the shows last season. When we were down in the basement. So, just getting on a bus, being able to take some time away from campus and getting up there when the leaves are starting to turn. We had some players that had never been across the bridge or to the UP before, so that was super exciting to be able to experience that with them. So we're super excited for that. It'll be, our first traveling weekend, so we'll load up the bus and head up there and be back by Sunday night.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. We're looking forward to it. And again, Sault Ste. Marie is gorgeous, especially before the feet of snowfall. So come on out, check that out. We'd love to see you there. Hopefully the travel will be a little bit nicer than it would be in, say, December. Anything else you want to chip in on this show before we...
I'm just super excited to be here. It's super exciting to have a space every week to be able to talk about our schedule, which will hopefully be released within the next week. We're waiting on some, solidification in terms of ice time. So waiting for that to come out. So I'm excited to finally be able to talk about that
Absolutely.
in its entirety. And yeah, I think, students are coming back to campus starting next week too. So I'm super excited that they're going to be coming back, and it's going to start real soon here. I'm super excited. I think Team 28 is going to be a great group.
Definitely.
Super competitive. We have a great leadership group. We've been working with them all summer to make sure we're all in line once we hit the ice. So I'm super excited to see everybody when they come back. This is super exciting. So I'm just happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, and thank you to Sue. And come on down to Regents Field. It's every Wednesday at 6 o'clock. That is during their happy hour. They have fantastic happy hour specials, like $2.50 for a buffalo chicken slider, $7 for a vegetarian quesadilla, and $8 for the Regent salad, which is an entree. So they have fantastic food. I think it was wonderful last week, so we'd love to see you here. Come on down to Regents Field next week, 6 o'clock. Coach Glisson will be with us, and we'll look forward to it. Thank you very much, and have a fantastic rest of your week, everybody.